A shroud of fog drifted over Golden Gate Park as dawn crept quietly across San Francisco. The city skyline hovered in the distance, blurred and half awake, its glass towers pale ghosts behind the morning mist. Dew clung to the grass, collecting in trembling beads along each blade. And somewhere nearby, the faint whistle of a distant ferry cut through the silence. Sarah Lawson pulled her battered Ford to the curb, the car engine ticking in the hush. She wasn't sure what had woken her so early, only that sleep was a luxury she hadn't enjoyed in months. Maybe it was habit, or the ache that lingered in her chest. Grief always found a way to summon her before sunrise. She stepped out, tugging her raincoat tighter as a fine drizzle painted her hair to her cheeks. For a moment, she stood there in the emptiness, breathing in the sharp tang of wet earth. That's when she saw it. A shape huddled at the edge of the clearing, tethered to an old, weathered fence. At first, Sarah thought it was a trick of the fog, but as she walked closer, her boots squelching in the muddy grass, the shape resolved into a horse. Small, young, its brown coat crusted with mud and filth. The mare's ribs showed in harsh relief, and her legs trembled so badly Sarah wondered how she was still standing at all. Rainwater pooled beneath her, soaking the patchwork of wounds along her side. A torn saddlebag slumped in the grass, half buried in mud. Sarah knelt to inspect it, brushing away grime with shaking fingers. She pulled out a scrap of paper, a child's drawing of a horse, all lopsided legs and a wide, hopeful smile. In bright, smeared crayon, someone had scrawled, "Help her." Sarah's throat tightened. Next came a small, muddy blanket, a single child's boot, and a halter with a frayed brass nameplate. The letters dulled almost to invisibility. Sarah glanced up, blinking away the sting in her eyes. The mare stared back, wide-eyed and silent. Her body shook with every breath, but she refused to collapse, holding herself upright with a stubborn, haunting dignity. Sarah didn't move. She stood frozen, reins sliding down her neck as she looked at the child's plea in her hand. "I can't do this. Not again." The memory struck. Her childhood pony, the barn fire, the way hope crumbled to ash in the dark. Not again. A sudden clatter made Sarah flinch. The mare jerked at the noise, nostrils flaring, legs splaying dangerously. Sarah softened her voice, barely more than a whisper. "Easy, girl. I'm not going to hurt you." She crouched lower, moving slow. The mare's ears twitched. She didn't step away. Not yet. Sarah's heart hammered. She knew what she should do. Call animal control. Wait for the city to handle it. That was the rule. She had no resources, no money, and her own grief was still raw and gaping. But as she looked at the mare, at the evidence of love, child's boot, blanket, drawing, she realized this horse hadn't always been abandoned. Someone somewhere had cared, and someone else had given up. Sarah hesitated. Her fingers wrapped around the child's note. She could feel the urgency, the demand to decide. In that moment, the city behind her seemed impossibly far away. The only things that mattered were her own breath, the shivering mare, and the choice pressing against her ribs. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the contacts for animal control, then for Jessie, the only friend she had left at the old stable. Someone who might answer at dawn. "Jess, can you get the trailer? I found a horse. No, she's in bad shape. Please, just come." The rain picked up, rattling on her jacket. Sarah knelt in the mud and let the mare sniff her hand. "Hey, I'm here, okay? I'm not leaving you." The mare flicked an ear, took one trembling step forward, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. Sarah felt a jolt of hope, fragile as spun glass. Maybe this was crazy. Maybe it would break her all over again, but she couldn't walk away. Somewhere in the mist, a jogger appeared, slowing as they caught sight of the scene. A lone woman kneeling in the mud beside a battered horse, cradling a child's crayon drawing in the gray rain. The moment was as silent as prayer. Sarah looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of grief and possibility tangled together. She didn't know if she could save the mare. She only knew she had to try. The rain kept coming, hammering the roof of Sarah's old hatchback as she and Jessie sped through the empty city streets. Jessie, her only friend left from her barn days, drove in tense silence. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, eyes fixed ahead, jaw clenched with the same mix of worry and grim determination Sarah felt pulsing in her own veins. Neither woman spoke much. The weight of what they were about to do, what they were risking, was heavy, unspoken. When they arrived at the edge of the park, the fog had begun to lift, replaced by a bruised sky and slick grass shining in the morning light. Maple, the name Sarah would later whisper, pulled from the battered nameplate on the halter, stood right where Sarah had left her, battered and shaking. But she was still standing, and that alone felt like a miracle. The battered trailer's gate rattled as Jessie unlocked it. Sarah approached the mare, her movements deliberate, careful. The mare's eyes darted wildly, and for a heartbeat Sarah feared she'd try to run, leg be damned. "It's okay," Sarah murmured, offering a piece of carrot she'd found in her glove compartment. The mare sniffed, then turned her head away. Getting Maple into the trailer was a battle. The mare's entire body tensed as they coaxed her closer. Jessie on one side, Sarah at the lead. At first, Maple balked, hooves locked in mud, her panic contagious. A car honked in the distance. Maple tried to bolt, nearly toppling Sarah, her swollen hind leg buckling under her weight. "Whoa, easy, easy." Jessie blocked her escape with quiet firmness, hands raised. "Let's give her a second. She's terrified, Sarah. We pushed too hard. She's gonna hurt herself worse." Sarah swallowed her frustration, blinking away rain and tears alike. Every minute Maple was out here was a minute closer to collapse. The child's note, "Help her," pressed like a stone in her pocket. She knelt, eye level with Maple, ignoring the cold that seeped through her jeans. "Hey, I know you're scared, but I swear, we're gonna get you out of here. Just a few more steps." Miraculously, the mare flicked an ear and, with a whimper, took one limping step, then another, until, finally, her front hooves touched the ramp. That's it, good girl." Jessie and Sarah worked together, their voices a steady hum, guiding Maple up the ramp. At the last moment, Maple's hind leg gave out. She half fell into the straw, her body trembling. Sarah lunged, catching her head before she could strike the metal wall. For a second, everything stopped. Maple's wide eyes, Sarah's frantic breathing, Jessie's hand on her shoulder. Then Maple let out a ragged sigh and collapsed into the corner, spent but safe. The drive to the stable felt endless. Jessie's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Sarah checked on Maple every few minutes, whispering reassurances through the narrow slats. At the stable, a few early boarders looked up, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. As they eased Maple from the trailer, Sarah saw just how bad her condition was. The leg was grotesquely swollen, skin hot and stretched. Maple wouldn't put any weight on it. Blood and pus streaked her fetlock, the injury far older than Sarah had hoped. "She's in shock," Jessie said quietly. "And that wound. God, Sarah, this isn't new." Maple refused food and water, flinching from every hand that reached for her. Her muscles locked in tension, nostrils flared in pain. Sarah's own memories surged up. Her old barn, the acrid smoke, The sight of her childhood pony lost to the flames. The grief was almost a physical thing, scraping at her chest. A veterinarian arrived within the hour. Dr. Emmett was blunt, his brow furrowed as he examined the mare. "This injury's at least a week old," he said, wrapping Maple's leg in clean gauze. "No sign of recent care. She's been neglected, plain and simple." He looked at Sarah. "She's got a fighting chance, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Treatment's expensive. It might not work. She's in a lot of pain. You need to decide if it's fair to put her through this." The stable's owner, Mrs. Kavanagh, watched from the barn door. She was practical, never cruel, but her lips pressed into a thin line. "We can't take on another lost cause, Sarah. The boarders complain about the costs as it is. Sometimes—" She trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken. Sarah shook her head, fighting the urge to cry. "I just need a little time. Please, Mrs. Kavanagh. Just a few days. If she doesn't get better, I'll do what's right. But she's come this far." For a moment, the only sound was Maple's labored breathing, the rain now reduced to a steady patter on the roof. Mrs. Kavanagh relented with a small sigh. "Fine, but she's your responsibility. Everything, care, feed, vet, comes out of your pocket." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. She could barely afford groceries, let alone vet bills, but giving up now felt like a betrayal. Of Maple, and of the girl who'd once begged for help with a crayon drawing. That night, Sarah didn't go home. She sat in the straw outside Maple's stall, wrapped in the child's muddy blanket, whispering stories and promises into the dark. "No one's leaving you behind this time," she vowed, her fingers tangled in Maple's tangled mane. Hours passed, the stable quieted. The city beyond the walls seemed to disappear, leaving only two survivors in the dark. One woman, one wounded mare, both unwilling to let go. And as dawn broke, Maple's ears flicked toward Sarah's voice, a flicker of hope, so faint it was almost a prayer. The world inside the stable felt untouched by time, silent except for the occasional shuffle of hooves and the whisper of rain tapping its way down the old tin roof. The outside world might have moved on, but in the soft gloom of Maple's stall, the past clung like cobwebs. Sarah had barely slept. She perched on an overturned bucket, her hair pulled up in a loose knot, a faded flannel shirt layered over yesterday's damp t-shirt. The stale scent of hay and iodine hung in the air. It should have felt comforting, but instead it reminded her of every hard goodbye she'd ever known. Sunlight crept across the floor in slow golden strips, illuminating the battered mare cowering in the far corner. Maple's head hung low, her thin frame pressed so tightly against the wooden wall that Sarah could see every quiver in her flank. Sarah tried to move quietly, cleaning the wound with gentle hands, but each time she got close, Maple's whole body tensed, eyes rolling with fear. "It's just me, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, voice low and steady. "No one's going to hurt you now." But the mare pressed herself deeper into the shadows, refusing comfort. Sarah set to work, her hands as careful as a surgeon's, humming an old lullaby her grandmother once sang. She'd read somewhere that horses responded to calm, repetitive sounds. Maybe it would help. She cleaned the angry red gash on Maple's hind leg, using warm water and the best antiseptic she could afford. The rain outside became a steady drumbeat, the rhythm of healing, or maybe just survival. With the cleaning done, Sarah sat cross-legged just outside the stall, a battered manual of horse care open in her lap. She read aloud, quietly at first, then with more confidence. "The key to trust is patience, and the foundation of recovery is consistency," she read, the words softening the harshness in her chest. No horse is ever too far gone for hope. She wondered if she believed it. Her eyes kept drifting back to the old halter, hung on a rusty nail near the stall door. She'd scrubbed it with a wet cloth, hoping to erase some of its history. As she turned it over in her hands, her thumb caught on the tarnished brass plate, barely legible in the early light, but still there. Maple. The name whispered with memory. Someone once cherished you. What happened? Sarah felt a pang of anger at the people who had let Maple suffer. She wanted answers, but all she had were remnants. A child's drawing, a single muddy boot, a story unfinished. Later, Jessie stopped by, dropping off fresh bandages and a sack of apples. She didn't linger. She understood grief's need for privacy. "Call me if she gets worse," Jessie said, nodding at Maple. "And don't forget to eat something yourself." Sarah promised she would. She didn't. As evening descended, the stable grew colder and quieter. Maple stood unmoving, only her eyes tracking Sarah's every motion. Doubt crawled up Sarah's spine. Am I doing the right thing? Is hope just a selfish dream? She wondered if it would be kinder to let Maple go, to end the pain instead of drawing it out. She'd seen it before, good intentions that only prolonged suffering. But every time she considered giving up, she remembered the child's note. Help her. The memory of her own lost pony flared hot in her mind. The regret, the helplessness, the guilt that never faded. That night, Sarah made a bed in the hay just outside Maple's stall. She wrapped herself in the small, muddy blanket from the saddlebag, breathing in the faint scent of childhood. The ache in her chest pulsed with each beat, heavy with memories. She pulled her knees to her chest, listening to the storm's lullaby. She whispered, "I'm here, Maple. I'm not leaving." The words were for both of them. Hours later, a soft sound woke her. Sarah blinked in the half-light and saw Maple standing closer to the stall door, her ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as if to catch Sarah's scent. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something. Sarah sat up, heart pounding, and quietly read from her manual, letting the mare hear her voice. Maple watched her, body trembling but no longer pressed to the wall. Outside, the city faded into dusk. Sirens wailed somewhere far away, but here in the barn, the world was distilled down to two survivors, one woman haunted by grief, one mare holding on by the thinnest thread of hope. Sarah closed her eyes, listening to the rain and the horse's breath, and told herself this was enough, just for tonight. She believed for a moment that maybe both of them could find healing, if only they kept choosing to stay. Every movement in the stall was deliberate. Sarah worked with the patience of someone who understood how fragile trust could be, especially after everything had been broken. Morning filtered through the stable windows, turning the dust into gold and painting stripes along Maple's dark, trembling back. Sarah brought the child's blanket from the saddlebag, now washed and smelling faintly of soap and old memories, and laid it carefully at one end of the stall. For a long moment, Maple just stared. Her big, haunted eyes flickered from Sarah's hands to the soft folds of fabric and back again. Sarah waited, heart thudding, not daring to breathe too loudly. She remembered what the manual had said. Don't rush, let her come to you. Maple's ribs rose and fell in uneven waves as she inched forward, stretching her neck to sniff the blanket. The scent of childhood and something safe seemed to reach her. She snorted softly, then, with a slow and weary motion, lowered herself onto the blanket. Her legs folded under her like a newborn foal. She let out a sigh so deep and exhausted that Sarah felt her own shoulders drop, as if the weight in both their chests had shifted. Sarah watched, barely moving, a piece of apple cradled in her open palm. You want to try? She murmured, holding her hand steady, arm aching with anticipation and hope. Maple's eyes flicked, but she turned away, the memories of hunger and pain still louder than Sarah's gentle invitation. Disappointment pressed against Sarah's ribs, but she steadied her breathing, trying not to show it. It's okay, she thought, one day at a time. Hours slipped by, measured only by the drip of water from the rafters and the quiet scuffling as Maple adjusted her sore body on the blanket. Sarah hummed softly, sometimes reading aloud from her battered manual, sometimes just sitting in silence. She wanted Maple to get used to the rhythms of her voice, the predictability of her presence. Later that afternoon, Jessie stopped by, peering over the stall door with a gentle smile. "Any luck?" she asked, voice low, careful not to spook the horse. "Not yet," Sarah replied, "but she's resting. That's something." Jessie nodded, dropping off a fresh bucket of water. "You look like hell, by the way. Eat something before you pass out." Sarah managed a weak grin. "Only if Maple does." The stable was alive with subtle sounds, hooves striking the boards, horses calling to each other from neighboring stalls, the thump of someone unloading hay outside. Maple's body flinched at each new noise, her muscles coiling as if expecting another blow. Sarah's heart ached at the sight. What did they do to you? Sarah's patience was tested over and over that day. She offered food, only to watch Maple ignore it. She gently poured fresh water, seeing the mare eye the bucket with suspicion. Still, she refused to give up. "I know it's hard," Sarah whispered during one quiet lull, "but you're safe now, I promise." Her voice shook a little, the promise heavy with all the times she herself had needed someone to keep it. As dusk bled into the stable, turning the air purple and cool, Sarah set the apple on the blanket and moved to the far side of the stall. Maple's nostrils quivered, scenting the fruit. Minutes passed, 10, then 20, until finally Maple inched closer, nose trembling. Sarah held her breath. Maple paused, shook her head, and with one trembling lip, nudged the apple into her mouth. She chewed slowly, eyes never leaving Sarah, as if daring her to take it back. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just about the apple. It was the first act of trust, the first small, vital bridge built between them. Night settled over the stable. Sarah stayed late, cleaning Maple's stall and humming lullabies under her breath. When she finally stood to leave, Maple watched her go, the mare's eyes tracking every move. Then, in a soft, barely there sound, Maple whinnied. Sarah turned, heart stuttering. "Was that for me?" The mare flicked her ears, stepping toward the gate, just close enough for Sarah to brush her hand gently across Maple's neck. The horse's skin twitched, but she didn't flinch away. Sarah whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the city glowed beyond the fog. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt the ache in her chest ease, just a little. Maple stood at the stall door, her silhouette framed by the last slant of moonlight. She was still afraid, still battered, but for a moment she looked almost peaceful. As Sarah walked away, she heard another soft whinny behind her, and she smiled through tears she didn't try to hide. She realized trust wasn't a single moment. It was built in small, trembling steps. Tonight, they had taken the first one together. Every morning began with quiet anticipation. Sarah would arrive at the stable before sunrise, clutching a travel mug of coffee and breathing in the sharp tang of hay and city rain. There was a new ritual now. She'd pause at the paddock gate, waiting to see if Maple would greet her. The first time it happened, Sarah nearly cried. Maple stood by the gate, her brown coat catching the gold of dawn, ears pricked and eyes searching the horizon. The small mare looked nothing like the battered stranger from those first days. She looked, for a fleeting moment, almost expectant. Sarah learned quickly that progress wasn't linear. Some days, Maple met her at the fence, letting Sarah brush out the knots in her mane or dab ointment on her slowly healing wound. Other days, Maple kept her distance, refusing to be touched, her body coiled tight with old fears. Sarah refused to rush. Every little victory, a nuzzle, a soft whinny, a minute of calm, felt like a miracle won against years of neglect. The first time Sarah led Maple into the paddock, her hands trembled nearly as much as the mare's legs. The stable yard was busy, full of city sounds, distant sirens, barking dogs, a delivery truck rumbling by. Maple's head shot up at every new noise, eyes wide and wild. Sarah spoke softly, her voice a gentle current in the storm of sensations. "It's just the city waking up, girl. We're safe here, I promise." A passing bicyclist startled Maple so badly she reared, nearly jerking the lead rope from Sarah's hands. Sarah froze, not wanting to tighten her grip and escalate the panic. She stood her ground and whispered, "It's okay. I'm right here." Maple's nostrils flared. Slowly, shakily, she settled back on all fours. Sarah let out the breath she'd been holding, resisting the urge to reach for comfort too quickly. Sarah wasn't alone in the paddock for long. One of the young volunteers, Lily, began spending her afternoons at the stable. Lily was 16 with ink-stained fingers and a quiet voice, always carrying a sketchbook under her arm. She asked if she could sit by the fence and draw Maple. Sarah hesitated, then agreed. She remembered being that age, needing somewhere safe to put her own tangled feelings. So Lily set up camp near the paddock, back pressed to the sun-warmed boards, sketching quietly. She'd whisper to Maple sometimes, stories about school or drawings she wanted to try. "You're safe here, you know," Lily said one afternoon, laying her pencil aside. "Sarah's good people. She'll take care of you." Maple watched Lily with cautious curiosity. At first, she'd bolt at any sudden movement, but Lily was patient, careful never to approach head-on or move too fast. One day, as Lily showed Sarah a half-finished sketch, a surprisingly tender portrait of Maple's dark, soulful eyes, Maple stretched her neck over the fence, sniffing the paper. Lily held her breath, wide-eyed. "She's so close." Maple's muzzle bumped the edge of the sketchbook, scattering shavings of eraser and pencil dust. Then, with a shudder, she allowed Lily's hand to rest lightly on her neck. Sarah grinned, pride swelling in her chest. "Look at you, Maple, making friends." Not everyone at the stable was supportive. Some of the boarders, seeing Maple limp and scarred, made careless comments. "She's damaged goods," one woman muttered, leading her glossy thoroughbred past. "Should have been put down honestly." Sarah felt heat rush to her face. She turned away, but Lily shot the woman a glare. "People forget," Lily said quietly, "that being broken doesn't mean you can't heal." Sarah became fiercely protective of Maple, standing up for her whenever anyone questioned her decision. She knew Maple wasn't a show horse or a quick fix. She was a survivor, and every new day was proof enough. Small victories continued to blossom. Maple let Sarah touch her ears one morning, ears that had been marked with old scars, twitching at every movement. She even accepted a treat from a visiting toddler, lips trembling but gentle as she plucked a carrot from tiny fingers. "She's learning," Sarah whispered to Lily that afternoon as they watched Maple doze in a sunbeam. "It just takes time." Sarah started keeping a journal of Maple's progress, jotting down every change, no matter how subtle. First time Maple came to the gate on her own. Let Lily touch her without flinching. Didn't bolt when the garbage truck rattled by. Rested her head on my shoulder, just for a second. The wounds on Maple's leg healed slowly, leaving behind white lines where the hair grew back uneven. The swelling faded, and the limp grew less pronounced, though Sarah doubted it would ever disappear entirely. That was fine. Perfection was never the goal. One gray morning, Sarah found Maple standing at the gate, waiting for her with bright eyes. She reached through the fence, stroking the mare's cheek. Maple closed her eyes and leaned into the touch, warm breath ghosting over Sarah's wrist. "I see you," Sarah whispered. "I see how far you've come." As the city stretched awake and the stable filled with noise, Sarah knew their journey was still just beginning. But in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by sunbeams and the scent of fresh grass, she let herself believe, really believe, that healing was possible, not just for Maple, but for herself too. The air was cooler now, touched with the sharpness of early autumn. Maple's coat, once matted and dull, began to regain its sheen. The limp, though still visible, no longer kept her confined to the stall. With steady medical care and weeks of patient work, Sarah had coaxed Maple through the worst. But the truest test, the test that went deeper than any wound, was still ahead. Sarah leaned on the weathered paddock fence, watching as Maple grazed in the pale morning light. Maple's scars were still visible, pale lines on her dark coat, but her posture had changed. Her head was higher, her ears flicked toward every sound, not out of fear, but out of a new kind of curiosity. It made Sarah's chest ache with a pride that was hard to put into words. Today, she would try something neither of them was sure they were ready for. "Ready for a walk, girl?" Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her with a slight tremor as she slipped the halter over Maple's head. She remembered her old barn, the smell of charred wood after the fire, the way she'd panicked for weeks just walking near the empty stalls. She knew how trauma burrowed in deep, how the body never truly forgot. They moved slowly, step by step, out of the safety of the stable yard and toward the wooded trails that bordered the city park. Maple's muscles tensed at every new sound. A barking dog in the distance, a child's laughter carried on the breeze, the low rumble of a city bus. Sarah kept her voice low and steady, narrating their every move. "We're just walking, nothing to be scared of. See those leaves? Hear those birds?" Halfway down the trail, Maple's ears pricked, and she halted. Somewhere out of sight, a car horn blasted, slicing through the calm. Maple whirled in a tight circle, nearly knocking Sarah off her feet. Sarah's heart lurched. Memories of her own panic attacks after the fire flooded her senses. The suffocating pressure, the ringing in her ears, the desperate urge to run. She squeezed her eyes shut, forced herself to breathe and whispered, "Easy, girl. I'm not leaving. I promise, easy." Maple's nostrils flared, sides heaving, but she listened to Sarah's voice and stopped circling. Her body trembled, but she planted her feet, watching Sarah with those wide, searching eyes. Sarah reached out slowly, giving Maple every chance to pull away. "You're okay. I've got you." To her amazement, Maple lowered her head and let Sarah's hand rest against her cheek. The touch steadied them both. They continued along the trail, each step a fragile victory. As they walked, Sarah realized how much she saw herself in Maple. Both of them cautious, both scarred, both longing for a sense of safety they weren't sure existed. She remembered a night not so long ago, waking up in her apartment with her heart pounding, haunted by dreams of smoke and flames. For months, She'd convinced herself she was better off alone. It was safer not to risk anything, anyone. Back at the stable, Sarah untacked Maple, running her fingers through the horse's mane. Maple leaned into her touch, heavy head resting on Sarah's shoulder. The gesture was new, a silent plea for reassurance, a moment of pure vulnerability. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel the warmth, the simple peace of connection. The spell broke when Mrs. Kavanagh called her over from the barn door. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The older woman had been watching their progress, careful and measured in her support. "Sarah," she began, "Maple's made real strides. No one thought she'd come this far, but we can't keep her here forever. You know the rules. Rescue cases need a permanent solution. If you can't take her on for good, we have to look for another home or—" She didn't finish. The implication hung heavy between them. Sarah nodded, biting her lip. She knew the situation. She'd been scraping by, every vet bill and bag of feed coming out of her dwindling savings. Still, the idea of giving Maple up, of sending her back into uncertainty, was unbearable. "I just need a little more time," she said, voice tight. "She's not ready. I'm not ready." Mrs. Kavanagh's face softened. "I know, but be realistic, Sarah. It's not fair to either of you if you can't commit." That evening, as the sky faded from gold to violet, Sarah sat with Maple in the paddock, arms wrapped around her knees. Maple wandered over, resting her head on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah stroked the mare's nose, thinking of all the times she'd tried to keep her own heart protected, how it had only left her more alone. "Are you asking me to choose, girl?" Sarah whispered, her breath visible in the chilly dusk. "To risk everything for you?" Maple's only answer was a gentle nudge, as if she understood more than Sarah could ever say. In that quiet, Sarah made her choice. Not just for Maple, but for herself. She would find a way to keep this promise, even if it meant giving up everything else. She would fight for both of them to have a home. The weather that day felt strange, heavy and restless, as if the city itself was bracing for something. Sarah arrived at the stable early, the sky a strange yellow-gray, clouds roiling above the skyline. Even the horses seemed uneasy. Maple, usually calm for morning grooming, paced her stall and snorted at every little noise. The air was charged, humming with a tension Sarah couldn't explain. By mid-afternoon, the wind picked up. Trees bent against sudden gusts, and the sky darkened to a bruised purple. The radio in the tack room crackled with weather warnings, severe thunderstorms moving in fast, flash flood advisories for San Francisco. Sarah hurried through chores, her hands shaking a little as she checked Maple's leg and restocked her feed. She glanced out at the darkening sky. She hated storms. They reminded her too much of the chaos after the fire, the panic and confusion that never quite faded. Lightning split the sky with a sound like a bomb, followed by a crack of thunder that sent every horse into a frenzy. Maple reared in her stall, eyes wide and rolling, hooves clattering against the boards. Sarah rushed in, speaking in low tones, trying to calm her, but Maple was wild with fear. Rain started in heavy sheets, drumming on the roof, leaking through old seams and pooling in corners of the barn. Somewhere in the chaos, someone shouted, "The main paddock gate's open! Secure the horses!" Sarah's heart dropped. She'd been so careful every day, but panic in the barn made everything harder to control. She darted into the hallway, calling for help, but voices were scattered, everyone rushing to keep their own horses safe. Another flash of lightning, another crash of thunder. Sarah spun back toward Maple's stall, only to find it empty, the door hanging open, the muddy blanket gone from its usual corner. "No, no," she bolted outside, the storm nearly knocking her off her feet. Rain blurred her vision, and she slipped in the mud, skidding toward the paddock. The main gate swung on its hinges, wide open, its latch dangling uselessly. Hoofprints stampeded through the wet grass, barely visible in the torrent. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she could barely think. "Maple! Maple!" she shouted until her throat was raw, running through the downpour, checking every shadow, every dark shape that might be a frightened horse. But Maple was gone. The city seemed to close in around her. Headlights flickered through the storm, car horns blared, sirens wailed in the distance. The world felt impossibly vast and dangerous, full of sharp edges and places for a wounded, frightened mare to disappear. Hours passed. Sarah's jeans clung to her legs, soaked through. Her shoes squelched with every frantic step. She combed the side streets and playgrounds bordering the park, calling Maple's name over and over, flashing her phone light into bushes and alleyways. Every time she stopped, doubt clawed at her. What if Maple was already gone, lost for good? But she couldn't give up, not now, not after everything. She doubled back to the stable and checked Maple's stall again, hoping for a miracle, but it was still empty. Only muddy hoofprints and a few strands of brown mane left behind. Lily, her sketchbook wrapped in a plastic bag, found her crying in the doorway. "We'll find her, Sarah. I'll help. She has to be somewhere close. She wouldn't just leave you." Sarah nodded numbly, clinging to that thin strand of hope. As midnight approached, the storm eased, leaving the city streets slick and shining. Sarah forced herself to think, to look for patterns. If Maple had taken her blanket, maybe she'd sought shelter. Maybe. Sarah remembered the child's boot and the playground where they'd found it. Could Maple be searching for the person she'd once belonged to? Horses remembered kindness, remembered places tied to love, even if those memories were buried under pain. She followed the hoofprints as far as she could through the muck and puddles. The trail wound away from the park and toward a small neighborhood, passing under flickering streetlights and past the locked gates of a playground. Sarah's heart thudded with a new sense of urgency. She found more tracks, faint but real, near the sandbox, and there, beside a toppled swing, was the child's boot from Maple's saddlebag, half buried in mud. Tears blurred her eyes as she knelt in the puddles, brushing the boot clean. The world felt impossibly quiet now, the storm replaced by a stillness broken only by Sarah's own ragged breathing. For a moment, fear threatened to paralyze her. She'd failed, lost the one soul she'd promised never to abandon. But then, as dawn crept along the horizon, Sarah saw a familiar shape standing beneath the playground's twisted slide. Maple, muddy blanket draped across her back, head bowed, legs trembling but upright. The mare's eyes found Sarah in the gray light, as if she'd been waiting for her all along. Sarah's relief was so sharp it felt like pain. She moved slowly, whispering, "Hey girl, I'm here. I told you I wouldn't leave." Maple took a hesitant step toward her, and Sarah finally let herself hope again. The city felt hushed in the aftermath of the storm, streets slick and gleaming in the pale light of early morning. Sarah's breath fogged in the cool air as she made her way across the empty playground, the only sound her boots squelching in the mud. Maple stood by the twisted slide, her silhouette trembling but unmistakable. The mare looked smaller than ever in the gray dawn, her muddy blanket drooping over her shoulders, her head lowered as if too weary to hope. Sarah moved slowly, every muscle tense with a mixture of dread and relief. She spoke in the same steady, gentle tone she'd used for weeks, the one that carried a promise. "It's me, Maple. You found your way back to me. Or maybe I found you." She stopped a few yards away, heart hammering, and let the silence stretch. Maple lifted her head, brown eyes meeting Sarah's with a wary intelligence. The playground, usually full of laughter and clatter, was a strange, dreamlike stage now. Just the two of them and the distant hum of the waking city. Sarah took another step forward. She remembered every lesson from her horse care manual, every story she'd ever read about rebuilding trust. But what mattered now wasn't technique. It was the truth of her presence, the unwavering steadiness in her own battered heart. "I'm not here to take you away from what you need," she whispered, voice catching on the cold air. "I'm just here, for as long as it takes." Maple didn't bolt. Her body shook, legs splayed and tail matted. But she stayed. Sarah knelt in the mud, palms open and empty, making herself small, letting Maple make the next move. "Remember the blanket?" Sarah said, her voice a breath above the morning breeze. "I saved it, just for you." The mare took a hesitant step, then another, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air between them. Sarah could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on both of them. Trust was never given all at once. It was built from countless moments like this, each one as fragile as spun glass. She waited, silent, as Maple's nose brushed her outstretched hand. A sob caught in Sarah's throat as she stroked Maple's damp neck. "No one will ever leave you again," she promised, tears mingling with rain and mud. Maple snorted softly, a sound more curious than afraid. When Sarah rose to her feet, Maple didn't flinch. Instead, the mare pressed her head against Sarah's shoulder, a gesture of exhausted surrender, and the first glimmer of real connection. They walked out of the playground together, no rope or halter needed, just Sarah's voice and presence guiding the way. The city was just waking up, garbage trucks rumbling down the street, an early jogger passing with a double-take at the sight of a mud-caked horse and a tear-streaked woman moving side by side. Sarah knew she couldn't take Maple back to the stable right away. She needed somewhere safe, somewhere close. On impulse, she led Maple down the quiet streets toward her small apartment a few blocks away. The world felt full of new risks. Neighbors might complain, animal control might show up. But Sarah didn't care. This was about survival, about proving to Maple and herself that they could both be brave. She cleared a space in the tiny backyard behind her apartment, dragging out an old tarp and the rest of the child's blanket. Maple hesitated at the unfamiliar smells and tight quarters, but Sarah kept talking, soothing, promising. "It's just for one night, I swear. Tomorrow we'll find a better place. Tonight you're home with me." Sarah brought out a bucket of water, some apples, and an old lawn chair. She sat by the kitchen window, keeping watch while Maple wandered the yard, ears swiveling at every creak and sigh of the city. The mare circled the grass, then lay down by the window as if understanding this was as close to safety as she'd known in a long time. Sarah stayed up, her eyes gritty with exhaustion, watching Maple's breathing slow. She listened to the city's heartbeat, distant music, laughter, the drone of traffic, and realized that for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. At dawn, Maple rose, shook off her blanket, and nosed the window. Sarah opened it, offering a hand. The mare pressed her forehead against Sarah's palm, warm breath steaming the glass. "We made it," Sarah whispered, a smile breaking through the weariness. "Just you and me. We made it." That moment wasn't just about surviving the night. It was about choosing each other, despite fear and uncertainty. It was about believing, even after everything, that trust could be rebuilt, not just in a horse, but in the world itself. As the sun crested the city's skyline, lighting up the battered mare and her stubborn rescuer, Sarah knew the hardest part was yet to come. But for now, in this fragile peace. She allowed herself to hope. The evening sun poured gold over the small paddock where Maple now grazed, her brown coat dappled with fading light. Sarah watched from the fence, hands resting on the weathered wood, eyes lingering on every movement. Each breath, each flick of Maple's tail, felt precious. The world outside their quiet corner hummed with late summer energy. Children playing in the street, cicadas buzzing, distant laughter rising from nearby porches. But for Sarah, time had slowed to a near standstill. She knew tonight could be the last night she would brush Maple's coat, the last night they would share this hard-won peace. The ache in her chest was different from the sharp grief that had once ruled her life. It was softer, woven through with gratitude and a kind of pride she hadn't believed she'd ever feel again. Sarah stepped into the paddock, a worn brush in hand. Maple lifted her head, eyes calm and steady now, no longer haunted, but quietly curious. The mare moved toward her, breath warm against Sarah's sleeve. Sarah began to brush, slow and gentle, tracing the white scars hidden in Maple's dark fur. Each one was a reminder, not of defeat, but of survival. "I wish I could keep you forever," Sarah murmured, the words barely more than a sigh. "Part of me wants to stop time right here." She remembered Maple's first night at the stable, the way she'd trembled in the straw, eyes wide with terror, refusing even the smallest comfort. Back then, Sarah had doubted she could save the mare. She doubted she could save herself. Now, as she worked through Maple's tangled mane, she realized how much they had given each other. Strength in the face of fear, and the permission to hope again. The sound of a car rolling up the gravel drive pulled Sarah from her thoughts. She looked up to see the family that wanted to adopt Maple, a husband and wife with their young daughter, Olivia, standing between them. Olivia was slight, maybe 8 years old, with brown hair pulled back and eyes as cautious as Maple's had once been. She clung to her mother's hand, half hiding behind her arm, gaze flitting from the mare to the fence to the house and back again. Sarah felt her heart twist. She saw something familiar in Olivia's posture, a wariness that came from too many disappointments, too many sudden changes. Maple, sensing the new energy, lifted her head but didn't shy away. She stood quietly, allowing Olivia to come a little closer, step by step. Sarah met the family by the gate, halter in one hand. The mother smiled, her eyes warm but uncertain. "We've heard so much about Maple," she said. "Olivia's been looking forward to this, but she's a little shy with new friends." Sarah nodded, kneeling to Olivia's level. "That's okay. Maple was shy too when we first met. Sometimes it takes time to trust again." She handed Olivia a piece of carrot, and together they waited. Maple stretched her nose toward the girl, lips trembling. Olivia's hand shook, but she didn't pull away. The carrot disappeared from her palm, and a tentative smile crept across Olivia's face. For a long, silent moment, a transfer of trust passed between child and horse, pain giving way to hope, past yielding to the possibility of a gentler future. Sarah's own memories surfaced as she unbuckled Maple's old halter, memories of loss and loneliness, and of every night she'd whispered promises into the dark. She wished she could freeze this moment, keep Maple safe in her care forever. But as she watched Olivia reach up to stroke Maple's nose, Sarah knew that holding on too tightly could sometimes be its own kind of harm. She stood, clearing her throat, and looked at the family. "Maple's special. She's brave and she's gentle, but she's also a little bit broken, like the rest of us. She needs patience and quiet, and someone who'll let her heal at her own pace. If you can promise her that, she'll meet you more than halfway." The parents nodded, solemn, and Sarah saw the weight of the moment settle on their shoulders. Olivia reached up, touching Maple's cheek with a softness that made Sarah's eyes sting. "Hi, Maple," the girl whispered, her voice trembling but bright. "You're really pretty. I hope you'll be my friend." For Sarah, letting go was an act of courage, not defeat. She knew that true rescue wasn't about ownership or control. It was about believing in the possibility of healing, even when the outcome was uncertain. Her role had never been to fix Maple, only to offer love and stability until the mare was ready for a new beginning. She handed Olivia Maple's old halter, her voice steady but full of feeling. "Take your time. Be gentle. She'll come to you when she's ready." Watching Maple walk into her new pasture, Sarah felt her grief mingling with gratitude, her heart breaking and mending all at once. She realized that loving someone, or something enough to let them go, was the hardest and most necessary part of all. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the field, Sarah leaned against the fence and closed her eyes. She allowed herself to grieve for what was ending, but also to hope for what was beginning, for Maple, for Olivia, and for herself. In that quiet, sacred moment, Sarah understood. The truest healing wasn't about erasing scars, but about weaving them into a stronger, richer story. And as she walked away, she knew Maple would carry a piece of her wherever she went. Weeks slipped by, each one a quiet testament to change. In the heart of the city, Sarah found herself adjusting to a new routine, one that no longer started and ended with Maple's needs, but that still echoed with the mare's memory. She walked by the old stable most mornings, sometimes pausing at the paddock fence, but her days had begun to fill with a new kind of purpose. She was lighter, freer, though sometimes she felt the emptiness like a phantom limb. It was on a sunlit Saturday that Sarah decided to visit Olivia's family farm, just outside the city limits, a place she had seen only in pictures, always with Maple in the frame. She drove with the windows down, letting the breeze tangle her hair and the scent of eucalyptus drift in from the roadside. The farm was nestled on a gentle hill, bordered by wildflowers and shaded by old sycamore trees. The house was painted a cheerful blue, and beyond it, a lush pasture stretched beneath the golden afternoon sky. Maple was easy to spot, a flash of brown in the green, her coat shining with health, her scars nearly invisible except in the right light. Olivia was with her, the little girl's laughter ringing out across the field as she read aloud from a picture book, her words carrying on the breeze. Maple stood with her head low, eyes half closed, listening as if every story was a secret just for her. Sarah leaned on the fence for a long time, watching as Olivia stroked Maple's neck and fed her bits of apple. The mare's transformation was undeniable. She moved with new confidence, no longer flinching at every sound, no longer marked by fear. Olivia, too, seemed changed. She was brighter, more open, her shyness softened by the gentle companionship she'd found. The family invited Sarah inside for tea, and she was struck by the warmth of the farmhouse, photos lining the walls, sunlight spilling through open windows, the faint scent of bread baking in the kitchen. In the living room, a special place had been made for Maple's old treasures. The child's drawing, the muddy boot, and the battered halter hung together in a shadow box. To Sarah's surprise, these relics were not sad reminders of suffering, but badges of resilience and hope, a celebration of everything Maple had survived and overcome. As they sat together, Olivia's mother took Sarah's hands in hers. "Thank you for giving us Maple, and for giving Olivia a friend who understands her in ways we never could. You saved them both." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were soft, grateful. The ache she'd carried for so long seemed to loosen. She realized that the love she'd given Maple hadn't ended at goodbye. Instead, it had multiplied, rippling out to touch Olivia, her family, and the broader community in ways she never could have predicted. Inspired by Maple's journey and the healing she'd witnessed, Sarah found herself longing to give that hope to others. She started spending her evenings at a local community center, volunteering with children and adults who carried their own scars, some visible, most not. She spoke to the director about her vision for an equine therapy program, using rescued horses to help people find the comfort and trust that had changed her and Maple's lives. The director listened, intrigued. "We could use a story like Maple's around here," he said. "Sometimes the hardest part is convincing people that healing is possible." Sarah smiled, thinking of Maple's first hesitant steps, of the way she'd learned to trust again. "Sometimes," Sarah replied. "All it takes is one person willing to care enough to try. The rest follows." With the center's support, Sarah launched the program, starting small. She shared Maple's story often, letting children see the old halter, run their hands over the brass nameplate, and hear how a horse with nothing left to give had learned to accept love again. Each new connection, a timid child brushing a pony, a veteran learning to walk beside a gentle gelding, felt like another ripple from that first act of rescue. One afternoon, Sarah caught sight of Olivia reading to a group of younger kids, Maple grazing nearby. Olivia's voice was steady, her eyes bright, her shyness replaced by pride as she told Maple's story, not as a tale of suffering, but as proof that everyone could find a place to belong, no matter how broken they felt at first. In quiet moments, Sarah would reflect on everything she and Maple had survived together. She realized that true compassion wasn't about fixing what was broken, but about being willing to stand beside someone in their darkest moments. Real courage, she knew, was risking heartbreak for the sake of connection, even if the outcome was never guaranteed. Sarah's life grew richer, her circle wider. She watched as the kindness she'd shown Maple continued to spread, touching families and children she'd never met, opening doors to healing and hope. She understood, finally, that letting go hadn't been the end of their story. It had been the beginning of countless others. On her last visit to the farm, Sarah lingered by the fence as Olivia and Maple moved through the pasture, sunlight catching in the mare's mane. She waved, a gentle ache in her heart, and turned toward her car. As she walked away, she felt a profound sense of peace, knowing the seeds of kindness she'd planted would continue to grow long after she was gone. In her mind, she carried this final truth. When you dare to love, to rescue, or simply to show up for someone, human or animal, you plant seeds of healing that may outlast you. Don't be afraid to care deeply, to risk your heart, and to believe that even the smallest kindness can change the course of many lives. That's the real legacy of rescue. Sarah smiled as the sun dipped low, watching Olivia and Maple, a new story blooming before her eyes, hope radiating out in ever-widening circles. And with that, she knew she had truly come home.